continue with part 2 of the Stuart Williams interview, where we go into those various topics. At this point of my transition, I don't know which topics come first, which topics come next. So you're just going to have to deal with this intro as we float in and find out and see what our heroes are doing in our discussion with Stuart and see what he's saying. Until then, here we go, transitioning in.
I just did a webinar on cost control. Oh, there it is.
In fact, there it is. That's what we made you think of you. It was like, we were, Larry and I were just thinking, there's not much money going around. Who can help us really, skimp on the money as much as possible? Yeah. I know. Let's get Stuart. He knows. He did a webinar. Sure enough. Let's get him.
And a blog.
Yeah. But more importantly, though, is like the part, of course, we were talking about recently is like when we were going through all those containers, everything about containers and all the little things, and we realized, oh my gosh, there's a whole ecosystem in there that has been sort of like on the edge. We've been hearing it, seeing it, but not quite in it. Well, there's only one person that could have been deep in it.
Because we're a Microsoft shop, right?
Yeah. Yep.
We haven't really looked at it. I mean, think about it. Microsoft Azure Container Services is 2 months old. AKS is 2 weeks old. ACI is 3 weeks old, okay?
Cosmos.
Microsoft woke up and went, containers, damn. And they went out and they bought people who knew containers. They bought Dias, they bought Redux, they bought a big ass piece of the main contributor to Redis, and all these other ecosystem things. They joined the Linux Foundation, they joined the Docker Foundation, right? They joined, and I don't know if you went to Build last time, but everybody was talking about containers, and then you get to the point of the conversation where you look at the Microsoft guy and you go, and what do we do with them? And Microsoft said, well, you run them in your data center. And they go, are they coming to the cloud? And Microsoft would be like, well.
That's under an NDA. I'm sorry, I can't talk about that right now.
Yeah.
And then in the background, they're opening their wallet.
Well, the people who know don't tell, and the people who tell don't know, except if it's me. And then,
Yeah.
One thing about being a former Microsoftie, right, is that you get an opportunity to worm your way into whoever's still there. Now, I can tell you the longer I'm away from Microsoft, the more that decreases, because working for Microsoft is extremely ablative on your life. Right? An 80-hour week is the starting place. If you come to your supervisor and talk about quality of life, their answer is you're fired, right?
Oh, dear.
What are you doing here? Yeah.
Okay, just a reminder to the folks out there that opinions expressed in this show are the opinions of the speakers.
Yeah.
And not necessarily of the company that we work for.
That's the old Microsoft. I don't know how the new Microsoft is. They could be all in Latin now. I don't know.
They restructured recently, right?
Things. They did. They have. They've done a lot of crazy things.
I understand they went from Gates to Ballmer to Nadella, and all three of those things were major cultural shifts, right? So the Microsoft of old is not the Microsoft of new. The old Microsoft would never be down with open source. The new Microsoft is all about the open source, right? They're big contributors to the open source world.
So,
and yay
is it really a kindler, gentler Microsoft, or is it an Elmo costume on top of like a Terminator doll?
I will leave that to the individual people's conscience.
I'm just saying.
But I gotta find a picture for that. I'm going to post that and edit it into the video.
I will say this: there are things that when I was there, they never would have countenanced doing that they do every single day now. Right? They are cooperating with other cloud vendors. They're members of all the standards organizations. They're active contributors to the Linux Foundation. Linux is a first-class citizen in the data center on Hyper-V and up in Azure, right? I mean, this is astounding, these changes, right? This is it's the same thing. They for a long time they were oh no about the internet, right? And then the internet, then they finally got the value prop of the internet and went, you know what? Now it makes sense. And now we're going to throw this energy at doing this, right? Mm-hmm. And they came out with, you know, ASP and webs and IIS and Internet Explorer and, you know, right? And they embraced the goodness that is the web. I'll point out that they were key contributors to the SOAP spec. Don Box worked at Microsoft. Mm-hmm. So, and then when REST came along, they were very quick to learn the value prop of a RESTive API for a lot of use cases, right? So, you know, so they are changing and evolving over time. And the other thing that's happening is convergence. I don't know if anybody out there is old enough to remember the word processor wars, right? But yeah, there used to be this thing called more than one word processor. And
yeah, word perfect,
word star,
word
baby.
Star.
Word star till the day I die.
I was a word star guy. Let's be clear.
What was that company? That product called Framework. It also had a word something.
Yeah. There were lots of things, and so what happened is that there was some domination in the marketplace, and then the open source community said, how would it be if we had different things that ran on different platforms, but we would agree on a document specification for different classes of documents? And Microsoft looked at that and went, you know what? That's completely fair. And that X that's at the end of your document extensions, mm-hmm. Those are open source formats.
That's right? XML, actually. When you look under the covers, it's actually a good old XML. It's nothing special about it. You can build a Word doc from scratch with Notepad.
Yes.
It's a zip file.
The point is that Microsoft understood or came to understand the increasing value of interoperability. That was the first thing that Microsoft, you know, things like SOAP and the X formats for Office and some other initiatives, right, were a realization that playing in the interoperable space had a business value to not only Microsoft, but its customers. And that has since evolved into an understanding that participating in open source initiatives and guiding their direction has a business value to Microsoft and its customers, right, and hence to us, right, as developers.
Indeed.
So are they throwing everything into the Azure though? I mean, are they? What I'm concerned about, and it's not a deep concern because, you know, I don't own any stock in them or anything like that, but you know, Balmer was developer, and Visual Studio has been the, bar none, across the board, the best IDE for developer productivity for many years. And now and now it's all command line. And now, you know, we're back to code.
Visual Studio Code. It's all Atom. It's all the other little babies.
So let's be clear, right?
Yeah.
One of the realizations that the entire industry it's dawned on everyone, right? Amazon, Google, Microsoft, the open source community, you know, the Federation X guys from, you know, the Planet Swango, everybody. What's dawned on them is this. There are different tools for different use cases, and that if you're really going to be productive, that you need a GUI and a couple of command lines in your pocket, right?
Right.
And that the big win in software development and operations and for the business is in a repeatable process. Mm-hmm. What we've now come to call DevOps, but back in the old days was called sustained engineering or total quality, right? That's when I first started, that's what we called those things. But this idea that there's a continuous, unbroken, repeatable value proposition that can be replayed over and over and over again, and that the differences between environments can be externalized, managed, and validated as part of deploying and managing software, right?
Right.
And so, you know, the rule of thumb that, because I spoke to some high school kids over the weekend as part of their career thing. And what I told them is it's good to know to master one platform really, really well and another platform pretty well, and to be the complete master of your primary and secondary tool, and then have a working knowledge of the others. So for us as developers, right, in the Microsoft universe, Visual Studio is our primary tool, right? One of the command line shells, whichever flavor you happen to favor. I happen to like Bash because I came from a Unixy kind of place. And Git source control are 1, 2, and 3, right? But you could substitute in Visual Studio Code for Visual Studio and PowerShell for Bash, and there is no substitute for Git. Git just is the winner. It just is. All their source controls suck in comparison to Git. I'm sorry. They just had it was Linus Torvalds' better idea, right? That's revolutionized source control.
Right. Even better than
Linux. Right? The proof of this is if you go look at the code bases of all the biggest software companies in the world, the old code's in whatever, the new code's in Git.
Yep.
Because the ability to visualize changes and have atomic units of change, and the fact that you can have better branch visualization and management and a better flow of code, right, is made it a winner. There are some ideas that are so powerful that they dominate everything, right? First there was procedural code, then there was object-oriented code, and now we're trying to be a little bit more function-oriented. And now, you know, actor models are starting to blend with those things. And what's emerging is best practices on just coding, and irrespective of your programming languages, that there are certain patterns that will result in your code being less buggy.
Right.
And easier to maintain. Now, I have a pet peeve, and that is I am sad to see indent-driven languages coming back into being popular. I love C# and C type languages because the semicolon is the king of all its surveys. And you could have a one-line program if you felt like it. Now, it's not a good idea. Please don't take that as an endorsement. But trouble with indentation-driven languages is, like Python, is they're hypersensitive to indentation and the kind of white space. And so if you look at the list of bugs about Python, a lot of them are about that. That being said, Python's pretty cool. But Lordy, I just wish it wasn't indent-driven because it gives me a Fortran 4 flashback. And, you know, no amount of therapy on earth makes that better.
COBOL, come on, column-driven.
Yeah, and honestly, I never did much COBOL, but I did a lot of Fortran, and, you know, code started in column 7, and column 6 was a continuation, those line numbers, and, you know, so Fortran 4 and punch cards was my first serious professional on a mainframe, was the first time I ever got paid to write code.
Okay, so we're back to mainframes and mini computers, and I mean,
so here's the thing.
Where do we go from containers? What's next?
So here's the thing about platform as a service, containers, and frameworks like Pivotal. And I will submit that they are all solving the same problem in a slightly different way, but they have the same net positive benefits if done correctly. So I'm just gonna The thing is that eventually infrastructure will disappear from our consciousness as developers, right? If I don't know if you remember when virtual machines first came along. I was working for a private company, and we did something that a lot of companies did, and we went to a utility computing model. Remember that phrase?
Yep.
And what does that mean? That means taking all of our physical machines and either junking the ones that couldn't hack America's program, and turning the rest into one enormous VM cloud using Hyper-V or VMware or Citrix or whatever. Didn't matter. And then everything ran under VM. Remember that?
Yep.
And the benefit to that was I still had to care where my VM was going, and it was a full OS stack. But if I had something like Lab Manager, I could say, I have this VM I want to run in the test cluster, and it would go, not a problem, and deploy it and start it for me, and then tell me what the name of the VM was, right? And I could script all that, and I could create a new VM by cloning another one and whatever, right? And that was, to some extent, that allowed us to ignore the server hardware, right? And the networking hardware, right? We could just go, la, 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 and wish it away. And then 3 initiatives, right? Platform as a service, containers, and frameworks with their own runtimes came along, like Pivotal. And they allow us to la away the VM parts, right? So, because if you have a VM, you really care about the operating system, and you're pretty tightly coupled to it. And you care about, to that extent, you have to care about the thing it's running on, and the thing that's running on that, and the thing that's, so if you look at it, we're on this journey, right, to not care about infrastructure anymore. And the thing that makes that possible is, yes, there's new technologies like containers and Pivotal Cloud Foundry and Platform as a Service. You know, I don't need to worry about having a SQL server anymore. I go up to Google and say, I want a relational database. And they go, how big? And you go, this big. And it goes, whack. And then you can check the little box that says, make this bigger when I need it.
Right.
And then you ignore that, right? The thing that makes that possible is a parallel revolution, mostly started from operations, about desired state configuration, which is this idea of going from the imperative, deploy this virtual machine to this cluster, right, and enable this and check that and do this and do that and do this other thing, to a declarative model that says, I want the end state to be that I have this topology, right? This is connected to this, and this is connected to this, and this piece of software is running here, and that's running there, and so on. And every time I execute that DSC, it looks at what is and makes it what it should be. And that's the other thing that lets us ignore infrastructure. Because now, and I'll just pick on Docker and Kubernetes for a second. But it's true in Pivotal Cloud Foundry, it's true in Platform as a Service to whatever degree, that you can say, this can talk to this, and this can talk to this, and this can talk to that, but this, and if you don't say what can talk to what, it can't talk to it. Right. And then you can deploy your big system with lots of moving parts, right? And only the things that are allowed to talk to other things can talk to other things. Right. And you don't have to care about memorizing the route command line arguments anymore, or how to set up a firewall, or how to set up a load balancer, or anything. You just say, I have, 4 pods, and I want them, and they're facaded by this service, and the service load balances, and here are the load balancing rules.
So I spent a lot of time learning IP tables. Okay, and back in the day, I spent a lot of time learning how to lay out a database on the different LUNs, and I cared, and now I'm not.
So that used to be a super valuable skill.
Right.
And I applaud you for digging in and having the grit to pursue it.
Yeah, but I'm out of luck now.
Admitting it too.
I'm out of luck now.
So here's the thing. What is a better use of human capital, right? Mm-hmm. You having to know stuff at the ridiculous level of granularity that we used to have to know stuff at, or your ability to deliver business value at velocity with quality. What's a better outcome for the human condition? And I would argue that we are coming to a place as programmers and engineers where it's close, where we can start to ignore boilerplate. We can start to ignore flummery. We can start to ignore infrastructure. We can start to ignore all that stuff that takes away from that 8 hours a day. And I'm being hypothetical here. I don't think I've worked an 8-hour day in my entire life, but as a developer anyway. And focus on delivering business value. So in a way that won't make operations crazy.
So you are Docker and containers and the orchestrators, are they the mutagen for turning all of the developers into superheroes?
They are a tool to facilitate those who have the wit and the will to embrace the new now.
Good.
To be successful.
I got you.
That's what it's all about.
Let me be clear. This revolution is not about any one technology. It's not about Pivotal Cloud Foundry, which is awesome. It's not about Docker and Kubernetes, which are awesome. It's not about platform as a service, which is awesome. It's not about desired state configuration and any tool you care, Chef, Puppet, whatever, who cares, right? It's the ideas behind those things that value producing business value and durable, scalable, operable systems for the business, which is why we exist in the first place, right? And that's the change. So when I hear somebody having an argument about Chef versus Puppet, it makes me crazy because they've missed the point. Right? They missed the point. And I'm not saying that certain tools aren't at better bake levels or, it's all about use cases, right? So for some things, Azure DSC, if you're going against Azure, that's the bomb, right? And runbooks. And for some things, I think Puppet's great. For other things, I think Chef is great. But here's the thing that lets you know that maturity is a-coming. Are you ready? It's this. All of those different tooling are slowly coalescing around a common file format and standard for describing the desired end state. And when that moment happens, the tooling, while useful, is not as relevant as the fact that there is a consistent way to describe it, in the same way that the X file formats for knowledge worker documents, spreadsheets, word processors, presentations, and so on, democratized those things across platforms.
Gotcha.
And that's what victory looks like, right? When the Puppet strings go away, right? And you can focus on the thing that you want to do, and me sharing a file with you becomes a non-issue, right? That's the happy place. When I can go as an architect and I can say, I have a solution space and it's got these moving parts, and I'm going to use elements from Pivotal. I'm going to use some paths. Some stuff comes already ready to go in pre-wrapped containers. One of the things that's really exciting about containers, by the way, is if I need a Redis server, right, and I'm not running in like Azure or Google where you can just go, I want a Redis server, and it go, bang, you've got a Redis cluster, right? I can spin up a Redis container, or I can go download a Redis cluster, which is a desired state configuration document written in YAML, right? And I can say, I want you to build me a durable Redis instance running up in my Kubernetes cloud or wherever.
Would someone build a indurable Redis instance? They would always use durable, wouldn't they?
Well, God, not intentionally, but I can tell you when we, Magenic, go out and look in the world, right, and we go, hey, that backing store could evaporate if the power goes off, right? And they go, huh? That's a bad moment.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, we run into a lot of those where like, that they go through all that. It looks like they spend a lot of money on certain things, and then they leave something that's like, it's almost like here's your house. It's the fortress of solitude up there, and it's got everything protecting it, and then there's a screen door in the back.
Yeah.
You can see inside.
Yeah, it's the old joke we used to make is, you've built a beautiful nuclear submarine. Pity about that screen door on the port forward.
Yeah. It's chrome-plated base metal.
The other thing is there's so many new things that there's this gap in between understanding how to use something and understanding why to use something, and then understanding the third level, which I call enlightenment, which is understanding for what use cases, in what way you should use something. In the container world, people abuse the name value pair distributed store. It's called etcd. And you see people using that as a synonym for permanent storage instead of a Mongo, a SQL, a Postgre, whatever, right? Something that's designed to be a permanent store that has, a business continuation strategy, right? So, e.g., you can get the data back if something horrible happens,
backed up,
right? So, I call it the shh day at work. Shh stands for something horrible happened, and you come into work and everybody goes shh. And so that's the space we're in now, right? The capabilities are kind of 80% there on all this stuff. And down the road, not that far down the road, I mean like next year, early next year, you're going to see a convergence and a stability for these things. And you're going to see organizations and individuals go through the three levels of enlightenment. What the heck is it? How do I use it? When should I do it? And how? Right? And that's where we're at now. So you're going to see, I've seen stories in the technology press about people running, writing articles, Kubernetes is not ready for prime time. And I'm like, well, what was your use case? And I read on and they go, well, we put a bunch of this stuff and it turned out to be all volatile. Yeah, that's the whole point, idiot boy. You misused it for the wrong use case.
Well, that was the point with Service Fabric. The folks that are like, will say Service Fabric, they'll solve all our problems, but and then they realize all of a sudden there's a problem. They spend $1 million to get there. It's like, wait a minute. You were told it was the bomb, but then you didn't realize that the use case that you were about to apply it to after hearing what it was good about it does not apply to it.
Yeah.
So what did you do?
The other thing that makes me crazy about Service Fabric is this. Don't build things on Service Fabric unless you are building components and that's what you know how to do. I'll point out that on both the Google platform, where the equivalent to Service Fabric is GCE, right? And on the Amazon platform, there's a morally equivalent thingy, sort of, is that the value of that library and those tools is it allows you to build scalable platform as a service components on which, with which, you can string those things together to make a scalable, durable, operable architecture to solve a business problem.
Right.
Right. They are not intended. It's like people who want to write their own video kernel driver or printer driver. Would you do that? No. Why on earth are you building on top of these fundamental building blocks without a darn good reason, right? Mm-hmm. So if you look at Cosmos DB up in Azure, right? It's built. The reason that Cosmos DB can do all those cool things is that it is a PaaS component built on top of the Service Fabric infrastructure and leveraging it so that the people who are writing the storage engines no longer have to care about, site-to-site failover, node-to-node, or any of the other things that Service Fabric does on your behalf, right? It allows you to focus on delivering document DB that now scales worldwide and is infinitely sized, or an implementation of MongoDB that is picture perfect, right? Or supporting a Gremlin instance, or it's about to subsume Azure Table Storage, right? Which will be great because the infinite scalability and quality of service guarantees that Cosmos as a product offers are because it's built on this building block. But that doesn't mean that teams should run out and build things on Service Fabric, right? I mean, if you're good at that, if you're good at building reusable components and libraries, and you fundamentally understand in your DNA how distributed computing works, by all means, build a platform as a service component on top of the Service Fabric. But it's not intended to be a generic app host. There are better things than that. Okay. And that is stringing platform as a service things together, or leveraging containers, or using a really cool, super scalable framework like Pivotal Cloud Foundry, or some combination of all of the above. Because, again, we hit nirvana when we spend most of our time delivering business value and not dealing with flummery. If you have to care about the plumbing in 2017, you're caring about the wrong thing.
Okay.
It makes total sense. It makes total sense.
Yeah.
And we've been trying to push that, right? The whole point of why we're trying to learn this stuff is try to figure out what stuff that we have to, as they say, let go. Stop it. Yeah. Let it go. We don't have to worry about that, and
so
just let it go.
I'll tell you a funny story about how some of these new technologies get put into the hands of people who have yet to hit level 3, enlightenment. So what do all three of these technologies have in common? By default, unless you explicitly tell them not to, they have 3 charming properties. The first is self-healing. If a particular node stops working correctly, it will self-heal by creating a new instance of the thingy and moving your workloads to it. And losslessly in most cases.
Right.
Charming thingy number 2, unless you tell it not to, it will scale up horizontally or vertically as required as the workloads come and go. Mm-hmm. And charming thing number 3 is you will never wonder if your app is alive and happy or not. So we have this customer, and I won't say who it is, who has configured their Pivotal Cloud Foundry instance and turned off all 3 of those features. So when a node fails, it does an operator alert instead of just fixing it and moving on.org.
Well, of course, because otherwise those people don't have jobs.
When it hits its scaling ceiling, on the existing provision, it just explodes and the app dies. And instead of relying on the health monitoring built into the platform, they are trying to shoehorn their favorite agent in on top of it.
Right.
Now, I don't want to be all Mr. Don't do that guy. Don't do that. Right? One of the things that describes a real intellectually oriented engineer is you let the platform be the platform. In other words, you find out what the DAO of Azure is, or the DAO of Pivotal Cloud Foundry, or the DAO of Kubernetes is, and you embrace that. You don't try to force the tool and the platform into some bizarre conflagration of what you think it ought to be. You need to let Azure be Azure, let Kubernetes be Kubernetes, and for the love of Pete, let PCF be PCF.
Okay. So
and that's enlightenment, right?
So how do we get there in 5 minutes or less because we're running out of time. We're going to blow your schedule. How do we get there in 5 minutes or less? And what keeps us from doing like putting Log4Net in my app and trying to log out to a
so here's the thing, man.
file system. Yeah.
Step one is it's a 3-step deal. It's easy. Step one is understand for each thing, no matter what it is, what its use cases are, when it's a good fit and when it's not a good fit. And start by asking the question, for my use case, is this thing the right thing to do? Start there. And you're less likely to make mistakes if you do that.
Okay.
The second thing is, before you shoehorn something into it, ask if the thing already has some flavor of that is baked in, right? And have a bias towards using the thing that's there if it gets you 80% of the way of the place you want to go. Be the 80%, like the Pareto rule is a super important rule in engineering.
Yes.
And the third thing is, if the use case is right, but you just can't make it work, and by work I mean deliver sustained business value that's operable, blah, 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 right? Then you need to reach out to people who have successfully done it and pay attention to what they did, and then ask yourself, what am I, personal responsibility time, what am I doing to fight the platform instead of being one with the Tao of it? That's the secret sauce.
And that's the final word right there, I think. Mr. Williams.
Yes.
Mr. Williams, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, you will be on the podcast and you will like it.
You will. And we're going to see, this is the one that I'm probably going to take a little while to put up because I have to, there's so much over here that we're going to be digesting. And I'm going to get my my daughter going to Colombia right now to put some stuff on it.
If you edit out all of the bad jokes, political references, and profanity, that would be great too.
We'll figure that out.
Well, then it'll be a 3-minute show though. I mean, come on.
Yeah,
come on.
Don't worry, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out. Just
thank you guys for doing this and for having me on your show, and I'm happy to come back whenever you want. By the way, you can catch me live on stage at Catch a Rising Star. Please tip the waitresses. Don't have the veal. That's my thing.
All right. Thanks, Stuart.
All righty. Okay, until our next show, Stuart will be back in the next episode that Stuart is needed. So, use case. See you later.
See you later.
Bye, everyone. Bye.